Welcome all to an alternative series of the RGN C64 Roundup, the 1990s Retrospective edition, where we take a look back at the game releases that took place in the Commodore 64's final years. For this video series, the content will be curated from games reviewed in Commodore Format magazine, most of which are games that I've never personally played before, so they're effectively new to me. We'll take a look at how some of the review magazines rated the games back in the day, and Brendan from Bastage B 64K and I will look to provide some retrospective ratings as well. And where better to start than the first issue, October 1990. Time Machine is an action-adventure game that sees you take on the role of a professor who's tinkering with his time machine when a terrorist attack hits the device, sending him in a time warp back to prehistoric times. Your job is to try and manipulate history so that you can create your own future by interfering with evolution and get yourself back to your own timeline and stop the terrorist attack from happening. Well, if that backstory sounds a little confusing, then so's the game. As I started playing Time Machine, I literally had no idea what to do. The game instructions were close to useless for me, as I just spent aimlessly going across the 5 screens that make up the initial prehistoric zone. I eventually realised that the grid at the top of the screen represents the 5 screens for each of the 5 timelines featured in the game. To begin with, you can see that the 3rd and 5th squares of the first time zones are flashing, which indicates that there is some task that needs to be completed on the 3rd and 5th screens. The first task is not too hard to figure out. Place the boulders on top of the geysers. I'm just not sure why though. I think we are trying to drop the Earth temperature by doing this, I presume. I had no idea what to do with the 5th screen and needed to resort to online help. Apparently, we need to get a whole bunch of these cute ape-like creatures into a cave. To do this, we need to use travel pods that will allow us to quickly navigate from one screen to another. If we zap this white thing, then a pterodactyl picks us up for some reason, taking the professor across any screen we want. Drop a pod on the 5th screen and then travel back to the first pod. When using the travel pods, we can bring one of the apes along with us. Why does it do this? It's never explained. And why only bring across one ape when there were others in the area I just came from? Anyway, the apes need a bit of convincing to go into the cave. A quick burst from your zapping device will fix this. Once we get enough apes into the cave, the second timeline activates and we can instantly travel to the Ice Age. Our ape friends now exist in the Ice Age, but we don't want them to freeze, so we need to figure out how to start a fire for them before they all die out. We can also help things warm up in this time zone by removing the boulders from the geysers, though it doesn't look like this Yeti-looking creature appreciates us doing so. Performing these 2 tasks successfully results in the 3rd time zone being activated, and we have more riddles to solve in order to activate the other timelines. You really have to think laterally when playing Time Machine. Many puzzles require you to perform some sort of task in one timeline in order to manipulate the environment in another timeline. When you figure it out, you realise that puzzles are quite clever, but for the life of me I cannot fathom how kids in the 90s would have gotten far with this game. I really like the overall presentation of Time Machine, but the gameplay is very fiddly. Some tasks you have completed can be reversed, which results in the timeline being deactivated and your professor being sent back to the prehistoric times, undoing a lot of your progress. As a result, everything starts to become a bit of a chore, as this time management aspect of the game feels like work instead of a fun game. Reviewers back in the day loved Time Machine, and Bastage B was certainly a fan, as he thinks this is one of the most underrated C64 games ever made. Despite its quality, it's not quite the game for me. I don't mind having my mind stretched trying to work out how to activate each timeline, but I really dislike having my progress reset just because I took a little too long to make progress elsewhere. Deliverance Stormlord 2 is a sequel to the original Stormlord, and you are tasked with freeing fairies as you fight your way through 6 of the toughest scrolling shooter platform levels I've ever come across in my limited gaming experience. Enemies come thick and fast, there are death traps everywhere, and the jumping controls are absolutely awful, especially trying to master the multiple jump mechanic. And that's a shame because everything else in the game is great. The graphics are really good, and the in-game music is a pleasure to listen to when switched on, and there are some neat elements to the gameplay. Each of the 6 levels offers something different, whether it be graphics or types of enemy waves, so there's a good deal of variation on offer. There are bonus levels which give you an opportunity to obtain extra lives by planting quickly deteriorating hearts for you to climb up on in order to collect gold coins. Deliverance ultimately sacrifices fluid gameplay for the sake of being difficult, and this was something that was commonly cited by Commodore Format and C64. Passage B and I hold the same overall view. Great production value, but way too difficult. However, for me, gameplay is always way more important than graphics, and as a result, my score is a little lower. Atomics is a top-down sliding game where you have to arrange atoms in a specific way to form a molecule. A picture of the target molecule is displayed on the left side of the screen, and it's up to you to move the atoms around into position. Atoms can be moved horizontally or vertically, but note that once you move an atom, it won't stop until it hits an obstacle. Atomics contains 30 levels with a time limit applied for each level. I'm usually a fan of games like this, but Atomics didn't really grab me. The concept of forming molecules is a good one, but the time limits felt a little short. You don't really have time to sit back and plan your movement ahead, and as a result I always felt more rushed than I should be. Also, the game could be presented much better, as the graphic style on offer is somewhat dull and dry. Iron Lord is an adventure game set in the Middle Ages with action and strategy elements. You are the son of the Iron Lord returning from journeys far away. You find that your uncle has murdered your father and amassed a supernatural evil army to take control of the throne, while your ancestral castle lies in ruins. Well, you're not exactly going to just let things stay the way they are, so you're going to go around the local villages trying to drum up support in order to build an army strong enough to overthrow your uncle and restore peace and order to your homeland. As you start to talk to characters, you realise this isn't going to be a straightforward process. Seems like these are hard times, and everyone is more concerned about what's in it for them rather than bringing peace to the world. I guess things haven't changed much, have they? Anyway, going around from one village to another, you get to learn what troubles each person is currently experiencing, and it's up to you to figure out how to make each of them happy so that they will throw their support towards you. To break up the quest a bit, you can head on over to the local gambling hall and partake in a bit of arm wrestling and gambling. You'll want to take part in these activities in order to obtain specific items or build up your wealth so that you can buy useful items. Also, assassins working for your uncle will show up randomly at times, and in these sections you need to engage in a first-person perspective sword fight. One of the most important parts of Iron Lord is the archery competition. Participating in this event will allow you to accumulate quite a bit of coin when you hit the bullseye. But more importantly, you get a trophy if you win the competition. And you really need to obtain the trophy, as without it, you can only build an army that is less than half strength to what you need. But boy, does competing in the archery competition feel like a chore. To win the competition, you need to get through 5 qualifying stages. Each stage is made up of 5 rounds, with 4 shots in each round. Doing the math will make you realise that you need to perform 100 shots to win the competition. To make things worse, you don't really have any idea as to what you need to score in order to successfully pass each qualifying stage. And if you come up short at any stage, then it's competition over for you and you have to start all over again. I think I spent over 7 hours playing through Iron Lord, and 5 of these hours were spent on the archery competition. Seriously, what was the game designer thinking about when putting the game together? Anyway, once you make everyone happy and get them on your side, you can head on to your ancestral castle and initiate war. In this section, you see all the army units displayed on screen, and you need to go around issuing movement orders to your units. When 2 opposing units meet up, then they automatically do battle and you sit back and watch the results. Succeeding in battle then takes you to the last stage of the game, the labyrinth. This part of the game is presented in a limited overhead view. There are 6 levels in this section, and in each one you need to locate keys and a magic sword. Between each of the levels is an arcade phase where you use your magic sword to destroy the demonic forces. Iron Lord is a beautifully presented game, really nice hand-drawn graphics and top-notch music soundtrack. Most elements of the game are interesting to play through, but for me the archery competition really spoils the whole experience. It's just way too long and a bit of a laborious process. If archery was reduced to just 1 qualifying stage, then I'd definitely be looking to award the game somewhat in the 90s. Let's see what budget titles were released back in October 1990. Spaghetti Western Simulator sees you cast as a bounty hunter as he chases down desperados of the Wild West. You go around shooting bandits that pop out from doors and windows, but make sure you don't shoot innocent bystanders. There are items for you to collect to help you with your mission, including food and extra ammo. I personally quite like the graphical style within the game, but everything else is somewhat bland. Shooting enemies seems to be an opportunistic event, and you don't really obtain any sense of achievement when you do manage to kill a bad guy. When you complete a level, then the game just repeats itself more or less, so there's little incentive to continue on. Kamikaze is a cute little scroller shooter where you fly a small plane while shooting or avoiding enemy planes, along with soldiers and missile launchers on the ground. When you come across a plane carrying dynamite, shoot it down and catch the dynamite. Once you do this, make your way toward the far left of the level and crash into the castle gate in order to rescue the hostages trapped inside. Another plane appears out of nowhere to replace the one you just damaged, so use it to take the hostages back to base. The plane can only carry 2 hostages at one time, so return trips to the castle may be required. Once all hostages in the level have been returned to the base, the player proceeds to the next level. I found Kamikaze to be quite enjoyable despite its high difficulty setting. I'm surprised that I'd never come across the game before. Bastage B considers the game to be an unappreciated shooter, and I have to agree with him. T-Bird tries to be a 3D shooter in a similar vein to Space Harrier. You control a Ford T-Bird, a transportation system capable of speeds up to 1,346 miles per hour, and your job is to destroy the swarms of aliens and dodge their fire. If a whole attack wave is destroyed, then you can collect a token that gives you a capability upgrade. Between each attack wave, a meteor shower appears, and you need to dodge them to avoid being hit. At the end of each level, you need to destroy a Guardian to proceed to the next level. The 3D effect in the game is rubbish, and the gameplay is just boring. You can actually progress through to the end of each level without shooting anything. Don't bother with this one. Now here is one that I didn't expect to enjoy, Tilt by Codemasters. Viewed from above, the task in Tilt is to rotate the screen so as to guide a ball across a maze into a hole. If the ball hits any of the walls en route, you have to start again, which means that the energy used on the previous tilts is wasted. There are a number of gates on each screen, which you must open by pressing the fire button at the right moment. As the game progresses, the ball gradually gets bigger, giving you less margin for error on manoeuvring it. This is quite an addictive little game. The tilting rotating effect is quite good, and the physics applied to the ball feel realistic. It's hard, but fun. How about we check the Gallup polls for October 1990? Let's see what we have here. Coming shortly after the 1990 Football World Cup in Italy, we can see quite a few football games in the charts, and most of these look to be quite decent, with a Microprose Soccer looking Italy 1990 taking 3rd spot on the full price list. The somewhat maligned Shadow Warrior takes the top spot, followed by the masterpiece that is Turrican. On the budget side of things, a game previously known as By Fair Means or Foul takes out the 1st spot. We can see that by this time, budget re-releases of older full-price games were already entrenched, with Fantasy World Dizzy being the only original budget game on the top 10 list. Time to look at another batch of full-price game releases. Satan is a scrolling hack-and-shoot style of game, made up of 2 separate parts. The overall objective of the game is to rescue wizards before they meet their demise at the hands of the red guy himself. The first part of the game may remind many of you of the arcade game Black Tiger. You need to go around caverns looking for 3 magic scrolls that will help you become a wizard so that you can take on Satan. A large part of this section involves jumping from one vertical platform to another, which I kind of found to be a little fiddly as the jumping mechanic is fixed, but other than this, I quite like exploring across the large game world. There are discrete sub-areas to locate and power-ups to pick up. Graphics in this section are large without being spectacular, and for the most part everything moves about fine. I found the mini-boss battles to be quite interesting and fun to combat, but the overall action fighting element of this game feels a little repetitive. The second part of the game is loaded separately and sees your player evolve into an axe-wielding wizard, out to save some fellow wizards. In this part, your main objective is to kill Satan before the time limit runs out. You can buy various power-ups from the shop conveniently located on the level, and you're going to need them in order to make sure you can complete your goal in time. I enjoyed the second part far less than the first. Gameplay is quite dull to me, and graphics here look a bit of a mess. Satan is quite average at best, and I would consider Commodore format score to be definitely too high, while I can understand Zap being underwhelmed by the whole thing. I would rate the game less than 50 as well if I didn't enjoy the exploration in the first section so much. Skate Wars is a futuristic sports game where violence plays as great a part of the game as shooting skills. The best way to describe Skate Wars is one-on-one football on skates with no rules whatsoever. There is no finesse in the game at all. It's just all about chasing the opponent and then clicking the button to try and dislodge the ball from them, and most of the time this results in your own player falling down on his butt. You're pretty much forced to play a game of counter-attack where you wait for the ball to spill free before picking it up and dashing down the other side to have a shot. Don't get me wrong, it's not bad, but it's not exactly engaging to play in the long run. Your team is made up of 3 outfield players, which I initially found confusing as only one of them plays at any given time. But once you move on to the second level, this starts to make sense. Hazards are introduced to the playfield, and if your player comes in contact with them, they die, being replaced by the other player until you have no players left. The addition of hazards kills any momentum you may have playing Skate Wars, as you spend more time worrying about them than what your opponent is doing. I was really looking forward to trying out Skate Wars, but this ended up being quite a letdown due to its poor execution and flawed game design. I guess I'll just have to stick with the Speedball franchise. Monty Python's Flying Circus is an arcade game based on the UK TV series, and you apparently control Mr. Gumby, whose brain has somehow split away into 4 pieces and escape into a cartoon world. So our aim is to retrieve the 4 brain segments. The first section sees you transform into a fish of some type as you navigate your way through a complex looking for 16 tins of Span that are revealed by blasting cheese stores and certain pipes. The gameplay here feels so sterile, and oh boy, doesn't that push scrolling mechanism just drive me crazy. Against my better judgment, I moved on to the next level where Gumby looks more like his usual self, but once again, the whole experience feels soulless. Again, you need to find 16 tins of Span as you navigate your way through the landscape of nonsense. It's at this point where I decided I had enough of Monty Python's Flying Circus and its nonsensical premise for a game. But I'll tell you what else is nonsense: the score given by Commodore format. There is no paradigm universe where this game warrants anything close to an 87, but I guess this is what advertising revenue can get you. Hang your head in shame, Commodore format. Based on the second installment of the Back to the Future movie franchise, Back to the Future 2 is a multi-genre game providing a mix of arcade action and puzzle gaming across 5 levels. The first level sees Marty on a hoverboard as he dukes it out with enemies trying to do him harm. This section starts off kind of interesting as you travel through the horizontal scrolling streetscape, but controls kind of feel odd. Like I never had full control, and you quickly realise that there isn't really much gameplay here. I like how you can hitch a ride by grabbing hold of a passing car, however. There is a subtle nod to Paperboy when the perspective changes to an isometric view, but the whole experience kind of outstays its welcome and starts becoming dull. The second level is puzzle-based, where you need to guide Marty's girlfriend out of the house without bumping into one of her family members. To do this, you cycle through the options of doors and select which ones are to be opened. This triggers the family members to move rooms, and the aim here is to clear a path for Jennifer to get out via the front door. I really like this level very much. The third level is a side-scrolling beat-em-up. I don't mind how the game looks here, and the action on offer here is fine. It feels like a decent budget game with some neat graphical touches thrown in. Not bad. The fourth level involves you solving a slide tile picture puzzle. It's well executed, but I'm not a fan of this type of puzzle. Well, the final stage is a repeat of the first hoverboard stage, but this time set back in 1955, and is a disappointing way to finish off the game. I found Back to the Future 2 to be a mixed bag. I quite liked the graphics all throughout, but the hoverboard levels failed to hit the mark, and the beat 'em up sections could have been a standout with a little more thought put into it. Passage B thinks that the game could have been so much better, and it's a shame that it didn't live up to its potential. This is a case where reviews from the past and the future all agree as one. And that is a wrap on the first episode of the RGN C64 Roundup 1990s Retrospective Edition. I hope you enjoyed taking a look back at some of the older C64 games that were released outside the machine's heyday period. I'd love to hear your thoughts or reflections on the games featured in this episode. Until next time, bye for now.